How do we congress? An exorcismic declaration of personal policy. Author's note: this article contains profanity, use of the first person, and attempts to journalistically reference Twitter. If any of these offend the reader as a consumer of rigid academic research, beware. I make no pretense of it here. It opens with Kairos, the timing. Gonna skip that one and go straight to Ethos by character. 1:13:23. Comedian Louis C.K. once described walking by a barrel of duck vaginas during his travels. Rather, while trying to walk by, a barrel of duck vaginas arrested him, and he survived to tell the tale. Went on to live in infamy for something else. In a book from a friend, the dedication reads, quote, "For the confused and longing," end quote. What a bag of dicks. Someone needs a little dead bear in their lives, for fuck's sake. The author uses the word "we" a lot, as if all people that are not her are some version of her past self before she went on her journey to enlighten us all. This myopic vanity is not her singular invention or possession. Too often, people do not know how to speak for themselves and make social critique. In this manner of speaking, society, the mass, is an emotionally driven herd after Bernays' own heart, of which the speaker is now the singularly freed former prisoner philosopher. She projects, quote, "Feeling moved to act but powerless to do so in an age that seems to be characterized by complexity, creates a tension in our lives that expresses itself both in hypervigilance and in the outsourcing of responsibility. We need to do something, now, but we need someone else to tell us what," end quote. Again, speak for your damn self. I read a quote somewhere that said something like, "Focusing on lifestyle choices and self-improvement takes the focus off of the industrialists and capitalists who have the power to make substantial changes," or something to that effect. Pretty sure it was Jensen, but I couldn't find it again, so I'm cherry paraphrasing. Confronting, but impeccable letter. It presumes neither action nor intent. It simply states that if there is this shared goal, then, to that end, there is a better method than this oft-attempted one. If there was another reason for self-improvement or lifestyle choice, it was not derided, though it was implied that saving the planet is why people do yoga, with plausible deniability. The spirit is missing. What is the difference between access and understanding? For me, the answer is usually asking. For too many, the answer appears to be that they are the same thing. Ask any servant. Pathos, by experience. Naomi wrote, quote, You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth," end quote. She said that you have to lose things before you can know kindness. In bad faith, the poem presupposes that people aren't born with any. In good faith, I know that it describes the manner of deepening an understanding in an overwhelmingly hostile environment. It's hard not to agree for who I would like to think I have grown into, but I have known plenty of folks whose losses cost them what kindness they had. I argue that walkabouts are a better method. I wonder if solitary, rite of passage vision quests weren't in many respects about getting to know your relationship, not to nature, in which presumably the querent would already be immersed, but to human society. Some people do okay without it. They don't thrive in frequent, prolonged contact with many people. Some do. I happen to not. Even so, I still feel the conflicted relief of distant city lights when I travel, which I hate doing. What must an extrovert feel? Even if I asked, would it be possible for me to know, understand, or imagine? Suffering can give you the opportunity to become a better person, but it is not a requirement. If an environment is deleterious to your natural state, it is harmful, but if it doesn't kill you, you will adapt. This is conditioning. People do it in different ways. Some people trusting the environment will believe that the onus is on them, that nature, the environment, is the arbiter of life and must be adapted to. Others will see the human environment, society, superimposed over the natural world as a harmful set of conditions to be resisted and adapt to resist it as well as they are able. Still others will see humans as an extension of nature and society as a mass of which they are a culturally responsible party. They will adapt to cooperate. Many will observe all, or some, or none of the above statements as part of their lives. People are different. They cannot be all grouped together just because Freud's nephew said so and enough people were acclimated to a sick society to convince some guys that it was a good way to make lots of money. Is the mighty bristlecone merely a damaged family because it is not the ponderosa? Or have they adapted to wind speeds, sun glare, and a bitter cold that many ponderosa will never know? Are jack pines a bunch of messy bitches who live for drama, or have they, like aspens, learned to negotiate life from fire in different ways? In the famous Milgram obedience study, people were observed to comply with authoritarian commands far more often than not. They were not asked what authority meant to them, how they learned it, or in what conditions. During the time of the study, corporal punishment was a widely accepted practice. It was 18 years after the Second World War, 10 years after the Korean War, and the Vietnam War had been going on for 8 years. There were still active residential schools, the last closed when I was in middle school, whose residents' bones speak to not only the racism of intent, but the level of obedience required of children. Compulsory education wasn't invented for Americans, but by Parliament, to create industrial workers. But it worked. So the state's government adopted it. And everybody made all the money, is the story I keep hearing everyone bicker with. But not everyone was told this one, and for sure, not everyone believes it. Doesn't stop a whole lot of recent converts from asserting a bunch of shit they just figured out at strangers who have just been there quietly knowing it's similar the whole time, like it's some kind of revelation. Nor does it keep some of the few exposed beacons from regularly assuming that everyone who agrees with them about a thing is somehow their invention, that they are not whole other people capable of reasonable dissent or worthy contribution, but endlessly exploitable minions. Talk about paternalism, colonialism. Too often presenters speak to their friendly audiences as if they were speaking to enemies, and friendliness is mistaken for complete agreement. How priestly! As if all pay fealty to varied constellations of thought lords who deign grace us. But articulation only helps contribute language to what was already felt. For the friendly, if privileged critics who don't know, not all people who figure things out on their own want to be known, seek acclaim, get credit, or have the means to commune among people with whom they might agree on anything. In good faith, I really think that most of the time folks do the very best they can in impossible situations. Sometimes situations can overtake people, not because they're true believers, but because they don't want to lose someone or something they value. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's life or limb. Lots of people have to make impossible decisions. Just as having a social advantage doesn't exempt one from the possibility of experiencing abuse, or dictate desire for power, or will to lord it over. Ask the ghost of John Brown, who died well as a good man. Neither does experiencing oppression foreclose the possibility of one being abusive or having authority. Ask the ghost of Nat Turner, who died as free as the envy of any old Viking. But I think it is easier for people in positions of power to believe in concepts of self-image. Sociologically speaking, conditioning does not concern philosophy as much as behavior. Not to say they are unrelated, but lots of people will do opposite things for the same reason, and vice versa. It's easier for an oppressor to believe that their hard work and goodness made them worthy in ways that some other people just seem to know that they themselves are not. Anecdotally, I can testify that my fleeting imposter syndrome, when breathlessly sharing a platform with Chris Hedges, was not about self-worth, but my remaining faith that others would find me valuable. Plenty of people have every reason to believe that they are not externally valued. That is not their projection. It is an understanding bestowed upon them by their conditions in society. I don't presume to know what people may or may not think about themselves internally, but I imagine that it is a great deal more varied than their behavior. Logos, the message. When someone is arrogant, vain, glib, or just plain awful generally, it doesn't make them wrong about things. It just makes them awful. But I must say that arrogance has only ever stifled my ability to ask questions that were either successfully leading or from which I genuinely learned something. It doesn't necessarily make one wrong, just immune to the knowledge of one's ignorance. Too many folks conflate people of whom they are ignorant with those other people's ignorance of themselves, an ageless vanity. I contend that anyone who tries to stifle your thoughts is not your friend, and that not everyone who disagrees with you is your enemy. In my blip of existence, arrogance is, for good reason, associated with youth. But humility, the great underrated, is something enforced on children that only a wise few grow into. Even a worst enemy is usually right about something. My policy is to listen to everyone and believe no one. That's what my thinky thoughts are for. I think it's a good policy to try to live up to. Even when I get tired of hearing very similar things, I know that they are not the same. And besides, I wouldn't want to be dismissed that way. On 1/7/23, J. Davis, Ph.D., tweeted, "Framing difficult, emotional, behavioral reactions to adversity or unmet needs as symptoms of some non-existent biological psychopathology has become so embedded in our culture that the vast majority do not even know there's anything to question. This is pure ideology at work." On 1/8/23, Dr. Jess Taylor tweeted, "Maybe the world is sick and disordered, and humans are simply trying to respond to a terrifying, abusive, unpredictable environment in which they are forced to perform fake, controlled, repetitive roles while working and consuming harmful, unnecessary shit till they die." 1/14/23. This morning, I was gifted this. On 1/14/23, replying to Megan Murphy, me, and Count Women USA at Good Men Projects, D. Carrie Diamond tweeted, quote, "Gail Dines points out that we are in the midst of the largest unregulated social science experiment in history. Robert Jensen, 10 questions for radical feminist Robert Jensen." Wherein Jensen interspersed the magic words. I don't pretend to fully understand these dynamics. In many situations, racism can be a more powerful force than sexism and vice versa. Life is too complex to come up with equations that explain and predict. Black people didn't invent the idea of white trash. Higher status white people did. I have argued that people who get labeled white trash should reject the pathology of white supremacy and embrace solidarity with other marginalized people to challenge concentrated wealth and power. By dealing honestly with reality, we can make more intelligent decisions about how to focus our attention on projects that will be most useful. Planning for a down-powered future requires us to make a lot of choices about what to hold on to and what to leave behind. Talk about some morphic resonance. Dr. Hubert Sheldrake, Ph.D., eats your heart out. Last year around that time, I was putting the finishing touches on a poem that mentions those very specific things in way too similar ways. The same thing happened with the Hedges article, same poem. It was freaky, and also I was a little miffed because I knew that no one would believe it. It's hard for me to see this as a strict matter of timing, so much as a bunch of scatterlings sharing the truth of one objective reality and trying very hard to communicate it from inside the disparate cells of a bad faith institution. 8 years after the obedience study, Zimbardo conducted his prison experiment at Stanford. He said of it, quote, "They began to do degrading activities, like having them simulate sodomy. You saw simulating fellatio in soldiers at Abu Ghraib. My guards did it in 5 days. The stress reaction was so extreme that normal kids we picked because they were healthy had breakdowns within 36 hours, end quote. Not knowing for sure, I must guess that by breakdown he meant crying, which I recently heard likened to vomiting as far as its social unacceptability. I have to ask, what kind of society feeds you poison and then derides you for upchucking it? Are you then, in your essence of being, suffering from a digestive illness, Or have you just been poisoned? Was the young man referenced above indeed broken, or was he honestly expressing his feelings, something a broken person would be incapable of doing? Don't believe me. Ask yourself, what is the point of corporal punishment? Utah Phillips once shared, I respect the kids. I love especially little kids. Little kids are assholes. But they're their own assholes, see? It's when you grow up and become someone else's asshole, we're all in trouble, like bankers and B-52 pilots. I think he was on to something. Deriding children for being is not an argument. It is trying to shame someone out of making one by attacking the timing and experience of their character. When this happens, it is harmful both to the spirit and letter of debate. If things were so obvious, they wouldn't need saying, but I would ask, what about the case being made is not self-evident enough without being awful? In the most recent of her wonderful books, Gerlich bravely offers a useful critique of frequently attempted methods of achieving a few widespread common goals. But not all people want the same things. At the conclusion of her most recent book, Dr. Taylor assumes that she has changed the minds of her readers 180 degrees from what they thought before reading. Quote, Women and girls, take a deep breath and take your first step toward breaking free from centuries of bullshit psychiatric diagnoses and psychotropic pills you have been fed, and prepare to dig deep. End quote. It's straight up insufferable, but the premise of her work was spot on. A whole bunch of people already agreed with it before she came along to give the proposition another strong advocate by developing it more in her own way, which is why a good many supporters bought her book in the first place, for argument's sake, in the furtherance of a mutual cause. Is she failing because she is not how I want her to be? Generally, my unsolicited advice is, when presenting an idea to the public, it's best to keep in mind that you don't know who you're talking to, and then to make no presumptions. Why not trust your audience? Maybe they will stick around and be trustworthy if neither bullied nor patronized. Why not speak to the people who came to hear you instead of letting the people who aren't really listening poison and dictate the manner of your speech? Maybe speaking to people as if they were your personal trolls is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why not aim for admirers? Maybe talking down to the whole of humanity is a sure tell of something that shouldn't outlive youth. What do you think?